Welcome to the second episode of the podcast. This is your proprietor, Tony Ortega, coming to you from an undisclosed location deep inside the interior of the Earth's crust, otherwise known as the underground bunker. Even though we're deep underground, we know that so many of you on the surface have been spending your hard-earned cash going to see Tom Cruise's hit new movie, Top Gun Maverick, which this week became the first billion-dollar box office smash in Tom's career. Well, good for him. But amid all the hoopla, several people have dared to dampen the party by mentioning that Tom, besides being a movie star, is also the face and the symbol for a certain totalitarian-leaning organization that we happen to keep an eye on around here. One of those people who spoke up did so in a really remarkable way, and it captured a lot of attention at Facebook and Twitter. We thought you'd want to hear from her. I'm talking, of course, of Claire Headley, who escaped from Scientology Sea Org in a very dramatic way, later sued the organization, and has also been a big part of the underground bunker. Some of you may remember the terrific series she helped us with, guiding us up Scientology's bridge to total freedom, step by step, so we could all understand what it was like to experience Scientology's many courses and levels. That remains one of our proudest accomplishments at the bunker. And so we are especially happy to welcome Claire to the podcast as we turn our attention once again to Tom Cruise and what he knows about the abuses in the Church of Scientology. Well, listen, Claire, thank you so much for joining me today. What I wanted to talk to you about was that I think a lot of us Scientology watchers, I use that term to include people who were in, people who were not in. A lot of us keep an eye on Scientology. And of course, we've all been watching the sort of return of Tom Cruise to the spotlight, to media, to press, because his movie finally came out that was delayed for like more than a year or something. And it was a huge hit. So I did a couple things at the website. I posted a review by Luke Thompson. I wrote something over at Daily Beast. But then I wanted people to understand, Tom Cruise in the context of Scientology to a certain extent. But then on June 9th, I noticed that you put up this amazing statement at Facebook. And I jumped on it. I put it out on Twitter. I wanted people to see what you were saying. Let me just read it for people who may have missed it.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, did I lose it? I thought I had it up here.
I
Oh,
can
yes,
I can find it if you want. Oh,
I
okay, go
have it.
ahead.
Here we go. Here we go.
Okay.
This is Claire Headley on June 9th at Facebook. She said, "Glad all you Top Gun fans are enjoying the new movie. Personally, recent posts about this new movie only serve to remind me of Tom Cruise and his crimes against humanity. Extreme, you may think, but destroying families is a crime against humanity, my opinion. Ask yourself, when is the last time Tom talked to his only biological daughter, Suri? Remember Katie Holmes and her extreme efforts to break free of his and Scientology's control? Tom Cruise promotes a dangerous cult that destroyed my family too, the same cult that almost cost me my marriage and my life, the same cult that forced me to have 2 abortions in which I fled from in 2005 with the clothes on my back and $200 in my pocket, to which they tracked me down across state lines to attempt to prevent my escape. Thank God they failed. So no, I will not watch the movie, nor will I ever support or approve of this scam of a man. Trust me, Tom Cruise knows exactly who he is supporting and the abuses that the organization perpetrates. I worked with him while I was there. No doubt my post will likely disappear with Facebook algorithms. I feel better saying it nonetheless, and thank you to my friends who understand. You know who you are." Well, it did not disappear, Claire. Tell
I
me,
know.
tell
Oh
me
my
what kind of
goodness.
an impact it had.
Wow. Yes. So, by the way, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Um, and as always, thank you for everything you do. You and other Scientology watchers, as you call them, have always inspired me and given me the strength to say, who am I to try and run away from this beast of an organization and be fearful. And it's my job to stand up and speak up. So that's what I've been doing. But anyway, yes, Mark and I had kind of talked a little bit about this movie coming out and we'd kind of thought, just let it go. But as I said in my post, just one night I was sitting there and another friend nothing against this friend, she doesn't know anything about my history. I haven't made my life is not about Scientology anymore. But another friend had texted me and said, "Hey, I've been seeing all these posts. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you." And that really moved me, those kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum to go, you know what? I am going to say something. And I just tried to make it as simple as possible. I'm not telling anyone to watch the movie or not, but I just think in this day and age, why is it that Tom Cruise gets a free pass? It does not make sense. The Me Too movement, all these different things, like, this is the age of the internet where people should know who they're supporting. And that's what I tried to sum up in my post. And yes, I was extremely shocked by the response. I honestly thought that, well, I'm not posting photos and I'm just saying what's probably to some people an unpopular opinion. And that's okay with me. So probably just disappear. And I was absolutely floored by the response.
Well, and Leah Remini retweeted it, right? And
Yes.
what else? What other sort of things did you hear?
Well, I mean, I think it was shared like 200 times. It was the most commented on post I've ever posted on Facebook. Um, and and again, I'm not a I'm not big on social media. I'm not so the response was just pretty shocking. And I mean, and I really appreciated it too. Like a lot of people, of course, there were the trolls who were just but that's like 2.5% of the response. But yeah, I had some German media reach out to me. I did an interview with them. I had some media UK reach out to me. I did an interview with them. And it was very obvious from the response that a lot of people are aware of Tom Cruise's high profile support of Scientology, and he should not get away with promoting an abusive organization, bottom line. That doesn't mean, I'm sure a lot of good people worked on this movie. It's not about them. This is about Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I saw that excuse online. I saw somebody reacting to something, either your piece or something I had written. Somebody reacted, well, you're telling us not to watch this movie. First of all, I didn't tell anybody not to watch it, but
Me neither.
I'm just saying people should be aware of who they're supporting. And one response I heard from somebody was, well, he's just one person. It takes a small army to make a movie, and why should they all suffer? And I thought it was interesting to see somebody else then responded, yeah, but they all got paid a long time ago. so, so,
Yes,
but
and to me more the point specifically about the movie is Tom Cruise is a producer. And at least to my knowledge, when Mark and I was still at the headquarters, Miscavige told us on numerous occasions, this was starting in 2003, that Tom Cruise had renegotiated his deal with the movie studios to where he would get a significant cut on the back end of the movie, meaning from all of the ticket sales and all that, which, as you and I both know, is far more significant than an actor's salary. And that Tom Cruise had agreed to funnel all of that producer percentage on the back end to Scientology. And Miscavige's exact words were, Tom Cruise is funding Scientology's war chest. That
whoa.
war chest, by the way, which funds a hate website with my family speaking out against me. So no, I will never approve of this man.
So the leader of Scientology said to you or in your presence that profits Tom Cruise makes from his movies goes into Scientology's defense fund. And we know that part of the work of Scientology's defense funds are these scummy websites that smear you, me, Leah, Mike. So Tom
Yes.
Cruise's Tom Cruise's work is helping to fund these online efforts to try to destroy you.
Yes. Precisely.
That's just Amazing.
Yeah.
And your point was exactly right. There's nothing wrong with a reporter asking him about that. If I had the opportunity, I would love to ask. That would be one of the first questions I would ask him now that I've heard that from you is David Miscavige was heard to say that your work funds Scientology's defense fund, which in turn then pays for smeary anonymous websites that are smearing people like Claire Headley. Can you comment on that? That's such a legitimate question from a
Yes.
reporter. Nobody could fault a reporter and you can do it in a respectful way. There's nothing disrespectful about asking Tom Cruise that question because it's got nothing to do with religion. It's
That's
got
right.
it's got nothing to do with his private life. This is business. This is what this organization does with money he raises through movies.
Yes. And then the next question, not specifically for Tom Cruise necessarily, is hey, IRS, what do you have to say about a nonprofit 501c3 organization that you've granted religious exemption having a war chest that attacks people who have tried to just leave and get on with their lives?
Well, that's just one of the, people ask me all the time, how do we, should we do a petition? How do we do reports to the IRS? And I tell them, I said, listen, many, many people have filed reports. It's not a question of the IRS not being aware that
Hmm.
Scientology has some controversies. It's also, I don't think there's any question the IRS is fully aware of the type of controversies that Scientology is involved in. And if the IRS started a investigation, there would be no shortage of things for them to look at, such as tax exempt money being used in private investigator campaigns to destroy people, which has nothing to do with religiosity or their church.
That's
No
right.
question that would be one of the top things the IRS could zero in on. I mean, Lawrence Wright focused on that in going clear. But when people ask about that, I always tell them it's not a situation that the IRS doesn't know about these things. It's always a question of the IRS having the will to take on Scientology because people think it's like this sort of automatic cop thing. If you can just present them with some evidence, they'll go charge. It doesn't work like that. Mike Rinder once, I want to hear what you think about this. Mike Rinder once said to me, he said, Tony, the way it works is the managing investigator over at the Department of Justice or the deputy IRS secretary, whatever the person is who actually makes the decision. Let's get into this. Let's investigate Scientology. They have to make a decision. Are they ready for that to be the rest of their career? Because that's
Yes.
what it'll be. It'll be years and years of fighting with high-priced attorneys, and not just fighting in on legal matters, but then they know they'll become under surveillance by Scientology and investigation. So I think it's just the IRS, and the IRS has really been decimated in recent years. They don't have a lot of resources. So
Yes.
it's not a question of, why don't they do something? Aren't they aware? It's when is the IRS going to get the will to dig into this again?
Yes, I do agree with that. It's unfortunate, but I think they lack the mechanism by which it's easy for them to roll back their actions. So, like you said, it would be a tremendous um, fight that Scientology would put up. But eventually, one way or the other, it's going to have to come to that. I mean, Mark always says, if an organization has billions and billions of dollars, how much are they going to spend to protect that? And that really does kind of epitomize Scientology, in my view.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your own history with Tom Cruise because you kind of hinted at it in your Facebook message, and you and I have talked about it before. But I'd like to hear it again, as far as
Sure.
um, you and Mark, you joined the Sea Org very young. Well, you were born in Scientology and raised in the Cadet Org and all that, and you eventually ended up at Int Base or Gold Base in California, about 90 miles east of LA, real secluded compound. But Tom Cruise came out there a few times, right? And
Yes.
tell me about your interactions with him there at the base. This would have been in the 1990s.
Yes, correct. So I started my billion-year contract, aside from my time in the cadet organization, in July 1991. But funnily enough, just backing up a little bit before that, being that I was born into Scientology and grew up in the cadet org, I can tell you I wanted absolutely nothing to do with this organization. I hated growing up in Scientology. I hated being called names as a kid. I hated that I never saw my mom. I had no family, lived in communal birthing, all of this. I as a kid, I just only ever wanted a normal life. So then fast forward to now, I'm a teenager living in LA. And of course, Tom Cruise was an up and coming star. And I can't, what was the name of that movie with the unicorn or not the unicorn, the white horse, like one of Tom Cruise's early movies. Either way, it doesn't matter. I watched that movie. And of course, in LA, in the Scientology circles, it was all the the talk that, oh, Tom Cruise is a Scientologist and John Travolta is a Scientologist. And I will say it had a direct impact on me. I thought, you know what? Maybe it was just England that was a shit show. And maybe Scientology really is amazing. And of course, that's not to negate the programming that I'd had since birth, that this was my inevitable path, but it had an impact on me nonetheless that Tom Cruise was a Scientologist. Anyway, fast forward to 1991. Now I'm working at the headquarters in the Sea organization. And I think my first interaction with Tom Cruise was actually with his staff. And that was in 1995. So Andrea and Michael Dovin were his assistants. And at that time, Tom was still married to Nicole and had actually drifted away from Scientology. This was during the time that um, he was just less involved. And Michael and Andrea were reporting directly to Dave and Shelley on what they were doing to get him back in, and just reporting on him in general. Like we
Yeah, you're putting it in nice terms. The way I described it at the Village Voice was they were spying on him.
Sure,
But
yes, they were. I
yeah,
mean,
and from 1992. First of all, it was Legend, I believe, was the movie you were referring
yes,
to from
yes, that's the
1985.
one.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, from 19. Tom and Nicole got married in 1990, and then she was very enthusiastic in Scientology. But then by 1992, she began to pull away, and she kind of pulled Tom away with her.
That's
And
right.
so for the next 8 years, he kind of kept Scientology at arm's length. In 98, he did come back long enough to do some stuff with Tommy Davis at the Hollywood Celebrity Center. But
Yes.
he really didn't come back into the fold until after he had broken up with Nicole at the end of the year 2000. And then David Miscavige made it like the church's big job one. Let's get Tom, back in and enthusiastic. But so for those 8 years from 92 to 2000, he was largely keeping Scientology at arm's length. And so Miscavige was desperate for information about this. And the story I wrote, thanks to your help and Mike Rinder and some others, was that it was the Dovins. They were in his household
Hmm.
reporting to David Miscavige daily on what Cruz was up to.
Yes, and they were Michael and Andrea were being handled directly by RTC at the headquarters because they were failing to get Tom Cruise back into the fold. So, for example, what I was doing with Michael Dovin was word clearing him on the ethics conditions, and he was doing lower conditions with RTC. And it was during that word clearing that he mentioned that he'd witnessed Tom being physically abusive with his staff. Like the specific that Michael referenced, as I recall it, was he saw Tom throwing someone up against a fridge.
Wow. And
And
just real quick for the people that aren't fully aware of Sea Org codes, RTC refers to the Religious Technology Center, which is the cream of the crop, the top of the pyramid in the Sea organization. It is the organization that nominally runs all of Scientology. Its chairman is David Miscavige, and that's why he's referred to as COB, or chairman of the board, by people in Scientology.
exactly. Yep. RTC is, as you say, Religious Technology Center. It's considered the police or inspector general network of Scientology. But as you say, yes. RTC does run everything.
So Dovin was bringing in reports that Tom was abusive to his staff. Wow.
Yes. And this was part of where Michael and Andrea were um, not such happy campers with their position. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot more to it than that. You know, I was not. I was just doing word clearing. I was not even in RTC yet at that time myself. I had been tasked by Shelley Miscavige to help with the handling of Michael and Andrea, and the purpose of that handling was specifically to get Tom Cruise back into Scientology.
And by word clearing, you mean just going over the definitions of things to make sure he's clear on what his job is and what he's not doing properly or something?
Yes. Yeah, so he had to read aloud on the e-meter the ethics each from the ethics book. I think we so word clearing, yes, it's just there are many different methods of word clearing. This one was him holding the cans, the electrodes for the e-meter, and he had to read aloud from the ethics book. And we did that with the ethics conditions and responsibility of leaders, which is Hubbard's policy on Simon Bolivar and that whole story.
And then, what else did you learn about? Or what else were your interactions with Cruz or his staff over the next few years?
Yes. So then, so let's see. So then I in let's see. Sorry, I'm just recollecting my thoughts on the year. So March 1996 is when I was promoted up to RTC. My next interaction was when Marty Rathbun was then auditing or counseling Tom Cruise to get him back into Scientology. As you said, this was in like the early 2000s. And Marty was doing this auditing at Celebrity Center, and I was Marty's correction person. Like if he messed something up in a session, I would have to have take action to fix that, basically. And so while he was auditing Tom Cruise, I was kind of the person who, if there was something Marty was having trouble with, I would help him to do a better job, is the simple way to say it. But even then, like for example, Marty said, "Oh, hey," Marty had told Shelley and Dave Miscavige that Tom Cruise was adamant he did not want his sessions recorded, his counseling recorded. Um, well, of course, by this time, every single auditing session it was required to be recorded. So Marty agreed with Tom that no, it would not be recorded, and meanwhile installed a hidden camera in the lamp in the auditing room and recorded it.
Amazing.
So yeah. So um, anyway, so that was some interaction there, and then the next thing was in 2003 or 4, I think it was 2003. So by this time Tom Cruise was now on OT7, which is solo auditing, OT being operating Thetan levels. It's the upper confidential levels of Scientology. And when you're on OT7, you do what's called a 6-month check. So now you're auditing yourself, basically. And so now Scientology, the way they monitor and keep people in the fold while you're auditing yourself is they call you in every 6 months and they sec check you, meaning they interrogate you to see, hey, have you been reading any um, articles on the internet that are negative towards Scientology? Have you, that kind of thing. Like, have you been seeing prostitutes? Who knows? Whatever. They ask everything in the kitchen sink
Have you
to
had
make
any
sure.
have you had any bad thoughts about David Miscavige? Right?
Yes, exactly. Are you planning to leave Scientology? All of those kind of things. Yeah. So it's kind of like the finger on the pulse, the way they keep the sheep in the fold. Um, And so Tom Cruise came to the headquarters because this was where he was going to do his 6-month check, and RTC directly administered that, which is very rare. Normally, someone goes to Flag in Clearwater, Florida for that. But this is Tom Cruise, so he's, Greg Wilhair, is David Miscavige's right-hand man, last I knew. The same Greg Wilhair, by the way, who came to the Vegas bus station when I was trying to escape to try and stop me. Um, so Greg Wilhair and Sue Wilhair, his wife, were doing Tom Cruise's 6-month check, and I was the examiner, which means that after Tom Cruise gets a counseling session, I'm supposed to double check and make sure that a satisfactory result was achieved by having Tom pick up the electrodes again on the e-meter, observing the needle, which should be floating right to left, just floating, and he should be happy. And anyone who's had a Scientology auditing session knows that 98% of the time when you go to the examiner, you sit down, you pick up the cans, the examiner looks at you, looks at your needle, and then says, "Thank you very much. Your needle is floating." And then they put down the cans. So it lasts like a minute, not more than that, if that. Nonetheless, uh, Miscavige also was, again, all of this was being videoed. And starting in 1996, it became a, a very significant crime if you told somebody their needle was floating and it wasn't. I mean, it's just a violation of their procedures, whether you believe in it or not. The point is to know that I would have ended up on the RPF if I said your needle was floating and that needle was not floating on the video, and I knew that. So, it just comes with the job kind of thing. So I did this exam with Tom Cruise, and his needle was not floating. So he said, "Oh, it was great, blah blah blah," and I wrote down everything he said, just like I was trained to. And I look, and I'm like, "Thank you very much," and that's all I said. And of course, he was instantly like, "What?" Confused, like, "You've made a mistake." Anyway, I was done. That's it. Put down the cans. Thank you. Great. I'll get this information into your case supervisor and we'll go from there. Anyway, Tom was very bent out of shape about this. And the crazy part is that Miscavige did a whole review and basically told him, "Oh, she fucked up. It's okay. You're good." By fucked up, he means, I don't know, I had out TRs allegedly. I mean, I'd by that point done thousands of exams. And sure, it was Tom Cruise, but didn't do anything different than any other of the thousands of times I'd done an exam. Anyway, it was just a good example to me of where Miscavige just bent all the rules for Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise needed to leave and he didn't have time to go back in session, or go back in for more counseling. So therefore it was blamed on me, and I was now assigned lower conditions because I screwed up an exam for Tom Cruise.
And just to maybe help the uninitiated a little bit more, I mean, the e-meter itself, and electrical engineers will tell you it simply reads skin galvanism, and it can be affected by a number of different factors. The fact that you're holding it rather than it being like, inserted somewhere. It's just, there's a lot of factors that could go into it. And so who knows what it means, but what matters is that by 1996, David Miscavige had put into place this really strict, very prescribed regime where you had to, the auditor, what you just mentioned, having your TRs in. And the way I explained that to people was that you just have to be so robotic in the way you ask questions that every single word you say has been prescribed. You have to say things this way, say things that way. It's all being videotaped. And the needle has to make a certain motion. And it didn't make that motion. And you knew, based on this regime, that if you called it a floating needle and it wasn't, you could be in big trouble. So you just did what you were told and did not pass him on the exam. This would mean that
Yes,
he would normally have to go back and do more counseling. He probably already had a plane waiting for him on the tarmac in LA that he needed to get to. He didn't have time for this. He was very upset. And so David Miscavige just said, just ignore it. She didn't know what she was talking about. And then you got punished. You got punished
that's right.
for following the rules that David Miscavige had set up, but that you dared to enforce against his buddy Tom Cruise.
Yes, that's exactly right. And by the way, you said that I could have gotten trouble if I if I said it was floating when it wasn't. Oh no, I absolutely knew. I very definitely would most likely end up on the RPF, the Rehabilitation Project Force, immediately. So even though I got punished for what I did, the punishment would have been far worse had I done, anyway, yeah, yeah. But other than that, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. All of that is exactly what happened.
It's just so alien, I think, to somebody that's not deeply into Scientology. But when you describe it to other Scientologists, it makes perfect sense, you know. And
Yes,
but again, what it ultimately illustrates is that Tom and Dave operate by their own set of rules, and rules that govern every moment of your life as a Sea Org worker. They could just stomp on those rules,
yes.
and you got punished, and he what? So do you remember what your punishment was exactly?
I was assigned lower conditions, ethics conditions, I think, condition of treason for betrayal after trust.
So like hard labor, I mean manual labor, something like that.
That time I didn't end up manual labor. I mean, already honestly by that point my life was a living hell. I was already I think I'd already been deprived of dining privileges. So and I was sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours a night. So, like, if there was something else that happened as a result, honestly, I was so numb to it by that point, I don't remember.
So let's you've told your I mean your escape story is incredible, so is Mark's, and I really encourage people to pick up Mark's book Blown for Good if you haven't already, to get some sense of what the two of you went through, and how, you know, you each had to have separate escapes, and then, you know, they tried to drag you back as you described in your Facebook post. But there was something you told me earlier about a specific way that they then what was it about the birth of Surrey? You had been when Surrey
Oh,
was born.
yes.
Surrey was
Yes.
born. So the progression was that
Sorry,
two,
sorry, Tony. Before we go to that, I just wanted to make one other comment that I think
yeah.
is applicable. So, at that 6-month check with Tom Cruise at the headquarters in Hemet, California, one of the main problems he was running into was that he didn't feel that Isabella and Connor were communicating with him to his liking. And that began a very strong initiation of Isabella and Connor into Scientology, which obviously ultimately ended in Nicole being cut off completely from them. But so then at that time, that's actually when Jessica Feshbach, who later became Katie Holmes' handler, started having interactions with the Cruz family because she became the counselor for Isabella and Connor. It's only applicable because, obviously, like you were asking what my involvement was. And the one other piece that relates to this is in September, roughly 2004, I was booted out of RTC, and the one and only reason for that is because I refused to divorce Mark. Mind you, it could have also tied to this Tom Cruise exam. Now that I'm thinking about it, that thought hadn't crossed my mind before, but it was definitely a major black mark that Miscavige had against me. Either way, that's not what was stated, but it absolutely was on my list of in his little black book. Um, but the point being that one of the last things I did that night when I was booted out of RTC and sent down to the hole is that Shelley Miscavige called me and said, "Hey, listen, um, I need you to pick one of two people, Laura Dolan or Chelsea Graves." These were two RTC sec checkers. So they would do interrogations for RTC on a regular basis. Said you need to pick one of those, and that person is going to stay in Religious Technology Center, and they're going to be going to LA tomorrow to do sec checking on Tom Cruise's staff. And so Laura Dolan and Chelsea was maybe in her early 20s. Laura was maybe 18 by this time. And anyway, long story short, I said Chelsea, and Chelsea then has been seen many times, several times. There's photos of her arriving at Tom Cruise's property. Again, it's just another example of RTC, Religious Technology Center, having direct and unusual involvement in Tom Cruise's life.
Well, no, this is very important. I'm sorry I tried to skip ahead. You're absolutely
No,
right
no,
because
no, it's
I
okay.
mean, one of the things that I get asked about is, do the celebrities really know what's going on in the Sea Org? And there's just no question that Tom Cruise must know.
Yes,
And this is another example was that at one point, and I was just talking to another Sea Org person that told me this, that one of the results of Tom coming to coming to base was that he started to complain that his own staff, not non-Scientology people, just the people he hired at his house, just didn't give him the kind of service he did from the Sea Org. And so
yes,
this Sea Org unit was sent out to LA to sec check and train his employees to give him the kind of service he deserved
yes,
or that he thought he
exactly.
deserved.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's
Yes,
incredible.
as it just evolved, I mean, Tom and David Miscavige, to my knowledge, are best friends. Shelley Miscavige told me they talked every day. And oh, and that was the other significant thing that took place right before I got kicked out of RTC is Shelley told me now Miscavige is doing a project to find Tom Cruise a wife. And
Yeah.
I then helped with the logistics to get Greg Wilhair fancy suits and flew him to New York and LA and other places to start interviewing women under the guise of doing an audition for a movie.
Right. That was the fall of 2004. And
Yes.
the way it was, Tom had broken up with Penelope Cruz earlier that year. But even though they were broken up, he still went to the Madrid Ideal Org opening in September. And the only time Tom Cruise has ever showed up at an Ideal Org opening, it was in Madrid, and he actually gave a speech in Spanish, which you can see on my website. And it was supposedly at that event, which is the last footage I've been able to find of Shelley Miscavige in public, by the way, was at that
Oh,
event,
wow. Yeah.
um, that he said something to Dave about having a hard time finding someone new after Penelope. And so then and subsequently, Dave gave Shelley that project, find him someone new, resulting, a couple months later after these auditions with them trying to set up Tom with Nazanin Boniadi, the actress,
Yes.
very pretty, very, very talented woman who,
Yes.
that story was told in Going Clear about how she dated Tom from November 2004 to January 2005, which was just about the time you finally escaped, right?
That's right. Yep. My escape was January 24th, 2005.
And then uh, it was in April 2005 that um, Tom and Katie announced that they were dating. And a year
Yes.
later, 12 months later, a year later, in April 2006, Suri was born.
That's right.
Um,
Yes.
now tell me the story about Suri's birth and something that Scientology did. You told me earlier.
Yes. So our son was born mid-February 2006. So again, in in talking back to my Facebook post, that's why I brought up Suri. So she's just basically 2 months older or younger, sorry, 2 months younger than my oldest son. And to my knowledge, Tom Cruise hasn't talked to her since 2012. And it just
And let me just interject real quickly so people understand.
yes,
You had been in the Sea Org for all these years, you and Mark, and in the Sea Org, no kids are not allowed. In
that's
fact,
right.
Scientology forces young women to have abortions in the Sea Org, and this had happened to you twice. But that when
Yes.
you escaped, you and Mark both escaped early in 2005, now you had the opportunity to have a family. And so early in
Yes.
2006, you had your first son. I want people to understand
Yes.
that context. Go ahead.
Yes. No, absolutely. And of course, the day we escaped, our entire immediate family cut us off. The day my son was born, my husband, well, Mark, called my mom from the hospital and said, "Hey, your first grandson is being born." And she said, "I can't talk to you," and hung up on him.
Wow.
This is the brutality of Scientology disconnection. It's just, I anyway, I'll cut off my emotions so I don't wreck this whole thing. But yes, so my son is 2 months older than Suri, and it just strikes me like, oh my God, could you imagine a parent not talking to their 6-year-old kid for now going on 10 years?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
the heck? And why is this okay?
But didn't you say
Talk
there was
about
something,
deadbeat
something?
dad. Yes, yes. So here's what happened. So in 2006, we were just, Mark and I were trying to get on with our lives. We'd lost our whole family. We had pretty much nothing. We're starting our lives over. We were so thankful and so grateful to have the chance to start a family. And our first son was born. Well, concurrent to that, Mark had started posting anonymously as blown for good, blown being Scientology's term for unauthorized departure or escape, and thus the title of his book, Blown for Good. So he was posting anonymously as blown for good. And really, he had just started reading Scientology forums, and as you recall back then, there was just some misinformation, and more to the point, there was like the actual stories didn't, you know, hadn't been told. And Mark and I both, being that we worked at the headquarters for so long, had a ton of inside information that and Mark started posting about it, which then brought on an onslaught of Scientology investigation of the two of us. They were doing special trash collections, tapping our phones, sending. They had people who were pretending to be friends of ours, spying on us, on and on and on. But specifically, we got much later, we got copies of reports that had been written at this time in 2006. And one of these reports had a picture of our son when he was 1 day old. And they said, oh, we think that the reason Mark Headley is jealous of Tom Cruise is because their baby is sickly. I mean, are you fucking kidding me?
Oh my
First
God.
of all, he's a day old, and second of all, like, what is this? Seriously. Anyway, I hadn't thought about it in a long time until everything that blew up from this Facebook post. And it just made me so angry, like that. And then of course they sent child services to our house and all this stuff, and it just they Scientology is the reason I speak out against Scientology. That's the beginning and the end of it, by the way.
They're very good. They're very good at making enemies because
Yes.
they're such bullies.
Yeah, and when it boiled down to it, I thought, you know what? Do I ever want my kids to be afraid of these bullies? The answer is hands down, never. I will not ever, ever, ever be silent about these criminals. I mean, tapping our phones, collecting our trash. I mean, Mark and I at least had a good laugh. They're like, huh, well, at least there were a ton of baby poopy diapers in there for them.
I remember one time I wrote about this. I think maybe it was at The Voice. It was so long ago. But I remember one time they put, they have these smear websites that go after you and Leah and Mike and me and various other people. And usually they're anonymous, but in more recent years, they've actually put their names on them. But they have these
Hmm.
smear websites where they will put up results of their investigating of us. And on one of these sites, they literally had a photograph of workers on the roof of your house in Colorado
Yes, yes,
repairing the roof. And I think the
yes.
point they were trying to make was, oh, look, they something about, that you have more money than you admit to or some
No,
garbage. And I remember
no,
I
no.
talked to you,
Yeah,
I talked to you guys and you're like, this was storm damage. We were covered. It
yes,
didn't cost us
yes,
anything.
yes. No, it was covered by our insurance. And yes, we have since been paying the increased premium. So there you go. But no, it was in July 2012, which was when we lost our lawsuit. And and it just happened that June 2012, we had this massive, massive hailstorm with golf ball size hail that destroyed our roof. But yeah, no, the point was at that time we had, oh, and also leading up to this, they had been posting articles saying, oh, Blown for Good's going to be Brooke for good when we're done with him and he's going to lose his lawsuit, which of course, the odds were not in our favor. They had the best multi-million dollar law firms in LA, going all up against us and our one little tiddly lawyer that, I mean, I've told you this before. There were times I myself personally was driving to the judge's chambers to deliver papers. That's how ridiculous it was. I mean, I'm glad we did it, but it was, and honestly, in the end, I'm glad we lost because now I have no gag order. They have nothing on me, but yes, they rigorously pursued those fees. And normally, we learned that in cases like that, there's normally just a handshake agreement between each side saying, hey, okay, we won't demand collection of those fees, but your client just needs to agree to walk away. And Scientology's response to that, as you know, was to say, no, we're going to rigorously pursue this 43,000 or whatever it was, 44 or 43 and change bill, unless your client turns over the rights to Mark's book, Blown for Good Behind the Iron Curtain of Scientology, turns over all information of every ex Scientologist they've ever talked to, including copies of all communication, turns over all media they've ever talked to. So, any correspondence we had with you, with Tom Tobin, Joe Childs, anybody, turn over all of that. And last but not least, agree to never ever speak publicly against Scientology ever again.
And just
So we were
to
like,
help
yeah, no thanks.
just to help people understand, there's no question you guys have been harmed in the years you had been in Scientology. The list of abuses you went through is ridiculous. You sued under a statute that's maybe a little difficult to win in court, and
Yes,
the judges, you should read, people, if you should read the appellate decision. The judge says, I've gone through this decision. The judge says, look, there's no question you were harmed, but there's a technical question about the fact that you were driving to work in the morning. That implies that you could have driven the other way. Well, sure, if you don't know anything about Scientology's control of the mind, right? So
yes,
it was just,
yes.
it was a difficult statute to sue under. You guys made a
That's
great
right.
effort, and you lost. And then that Scientology was
And
awarded.
also too, and as you note, in that final decision, the judge also said, had you pursued other causes of action, had you pursued other causes of action, such as false imprisonment, assault and battery are the two that I remember, you may have fared differently.
Yeah. So
So
in other words,
I at least take away from it. Yes, exactly.
it was a
That's
legal
right.
victory for Scientology, not a factual one. The facts were on
Yes,
your side, but as a result, they ended up with winning some attorney's fees in the 40,000 range. And yeah, I remember that letter. They told you guys, okay, we'll forget about the 40,000, but you not only have to turn over Mark's book to us, you have to spy for us. I mean, they were literally asking
exactly.
you to spy for them to get rid of the
Yes,
40,000. And thank goodness you guys raised the money and you didn't have to do that. So I'm just really glad you didn't have to do
yes,
that. But it was
yes. And so we sold Mark's van. We came up with the money, and then a good friend of ours said, "Hey, you should do this fundraiser." We had already figured out how to pay. Not that we had, like I said, we'd sold Mark's work van. It was not like we weren't a bit in a bind, but we would have been okay. We weren't, and I had scrambled because they said they were going to go after our house and everything. So I pulled together a trust. I got our wills in place. I transferred our house to a trust just to make sure our kids would be okay. I I was like, "Oh my god." And all of that, so we paid it, and then they tried to say that we were paid. The Vanity Fair article came out right at that time, and they were trying to say that, in fact, not trying to. They posted somewhere saying that we were paid for that article, and that's
yeah,
how we paid
right,
the bill.
right.
For the record, no, I've not received 1 cent. And actually, personally, I've never been paid for anything, including, by the way, the check that Ken Moxon gave us for deposition because they're required to pay us minimum wage. Fuck you, Scientology. Check your reconciliations. I've never deposited
That's great.
it.
Well,
Anyway,
so yeah, and
but
again,
yes, so
this
sorry
is
to close that out though. We did
yeah,
that. So then we paid it. We did this online fundraiser. I was crying for 2 weeks. We had people. donating from all over the world, and we were made whole on that money that we paid. And Mark got his van back, and Scientology was all in a kerfluffle because they were expecting that we were not going to be able to pay that, and they were going to have a field day, kicking us out in the street and everything else. Whatever they had planned, I don't know. But then, of course, they were had PIs driving by taking pictures of our roof to say somehow that that had anything to do with the lawsuit.
Well, and they tell you guys, they tell all Sea Org workers that if you dare to leave, you're going to end up destitute. Flipping burgers at McDonald's or whatever. But you guys are so great. I mean, Mark has this technical genius that he has in this business he's created, and you're a financial genius. So the two of you together are just formidable, and you're doing great. But let's get back to, I mean, the thing that
Thank you.
that
And by the
strikes.
way, I credit Mark with that. There's not a day that goes by that he yes, you're right. He has always had technical a love for all things technical. I thought for sure that I was screwed because what am I going to say? Oh, I'm a sec checker. I'm a cramming officer. I worked in a cult for 30 years. Yeah, no, I do not have any references. But yeah, and Mark always just, obviously I love him, but he always just had this faith in me and this confidence that I didn't have, being that I was grew up in Scientology, and I just so appreciate that. And yes, we have made things happen, and we worked very hard, and we're very proud of the life that we've built.
Oh, you've done amazing. And no thanks to Scientology, which has tried so hard to destroy you guys time and time again.
Yes.
And getting back to our original subject, Tom Cruise knows. He knows what's going on. He knows the score. He knows what
Yes.
Scientology is doing with his money, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's the point. Is I knew it was going to be. I see some people saying let's boycott. No, look, the movie just passed $1 billion. Okay, it's a very popular movie. I've always said that. Look, Tom Cruise is a very talented actor. He's a good businessman. That's not the issue. The issue
No, it
is
is not.
that he is the symbol of Scientology. Scientology is probably hanging on largely because of Tom Cruise and what he represents, and that people, especially in overseas, who have a more sort of basic thought process about America and its celebrities, hey, if it's good for Tom Cruise, maybe it's good for me. Scientology counts on people making that assumption and trying out Scientology. So
That's right.
this is why I tried to do the same thing at the Daily Beast, and you did on Facebook. Just let people know, look, that movie that you're going to, you are supporting this guy who is the face of a totalitarian, abusive organization, and he knows about it. He's complicit in it, right?
Yes, and he's continuing to support them despite knowing that. Yes, I mean there were also multiple times when we were still at the headquarters where Miscavige told us that he was telling Tom Cruise about what management was doing to him, and that Tom offered to come beat them up personally. So yes, he absolutely knows. He's not at arm's length from this. David Miscavige is his best friend, and Tom Cruise is funding this abusive organization, just like you said. And he knows all about it.
Well, he's a true believer. That's the other thing people are always asking me is like, Tony, don't you think that he would leave if he could, but they have too much dirt on him? I said, you don't understand the situation at all. He really
Mhm.
believes that L. Ron Hubbard is the greatest human being who ever lived. He really believes that David Miscavige is the most important human being alive today, and that only
Yes.
Scientology will save this planet from being the prison planet that it is, that people don't realize. So when people say, how can he believe that crazy thing? I always respond, he can't understand why you haven't joined.
Right. Exactly. Good response. That I know it's the mind control. I don't know what to say. And of course he's entirely cushioned and protected by RTC. So there's unlike, me or Mark or whoever, we reached our breaking point. Our lives were completely miserable. He's not likely to get to that point. perhaps he could have gotten to that point when Katie and Suri left, and but he didn't. He put Scientology ahead of his own family.
Well, let's talk about that because that's the other thing that's is so blatantly obvious about this situation that the press never asks him about. And that
Yes.
is, when Katie decided to leave in 2012, she did it in a very surgical way. Tom was over in Iceland filming a movie, and she had these burner phones and all this stuff, and she just made it was like a Mission Impossible mission. I mean, she got
Yes.
out of there, and the result was this huge amount of bad press for the Church of Scientology. Well,
That's right.
in most cases, then a Scientologist whose spouse causes a huge flap like that would be told to disconnect from them, right? But
Mhm.
this is Tom
Correct.
Cruise. He's a celebrity. I always tell people celebrities, the number one thing to know about celebrities is celebrities get to break all the rules. Yes, Katie probably is considered an SP by David Miscavige, and that makes Suri PTS, which means Suri is connected to a suppressive person. And in Scientology,
Yes.
SP is the worst thing you can call somebody. That means it's kind of an evil person against Scientology. So if Katie's this evil enemy, Suri is tainted because she's connected to her. And so a normal Scientologist would be told, you can't see them anymore, cut them out of your lives. But he's not. He's not a normal person. He's not just a celebrity at Scientology. He's the most important celebrity. If Tom Cruise wanted to, he could see Katie and Suri right now. So why
That's
doesn't
right.
he? He doesn't because he has decided to choose Scientology over his own daughter.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And it's just
Be
amazing that he doesn't get asked about that, especially when Katie and Suri are obviously doing so well and the press loves them. And I guess everyone's just waiting for Suri to turn 18 and so they can try to interview her and ask her herself. But
Yeah. And
what
honestly, I will say, honestly, n not to it's not what Tom Cruise is doing is not okay. I am grateful, though,
thank you.
that Suri does not have that evil influence in her life and that she's not being pressured to join Scientology. For that, I am extremely thankful.
That she's much better off. And also I've been asked why did Katie leave when she did? And some people point out that, well, Suri turned 6 and she was probably just about to start Scientology training. But the other thing I
Yes.
was that keep in mind that Katie, during those years, was seeing Isabella and Connor going through Scientology. She had this example in
That's right.
front of her of what children go through. They have special interrogations just for kids, and kids are trained to turn in their parents if they see their parents doing something out ethics, not by the rules. So
That's right.
Katie knew what children go through. She had plenty of
Yes,
reason to
and she
understand.
had personal knowledge of the wedge that Scientology drives between children and their parents. It is conditional love through and through. So yes, you're absolutely spot on. She personally witnessed that, and yes, she saw what was going on with Connor and Isabella.
And it's just amazing that no reporter can just ask him, "How's Suri? Why haven't you seen her?" I guess it's
Right.
just they just wanna they can't they're put under so many restrictions about what they can ask, and they if you ever want Tom back on your show, you know, and, I guess they're just nobody wants to do it.
Yep, I guess so. And that's where, you and I will just keep on saying what's going on.
Well, and
But the
and
bottom line is like I said though, it's the age of the internet. Like seriously, why is this okay? Why?
Yeah, I wonder what it's going to take before the press takes a harder look at him. And there's been new stuff coming out. Leah gave, she had written some stuff about Tom and she gave to me to put on my website that was kind of like a missing chapter from her book. And she had some revelations about Tom's terrible behavior. And then, Brian Seymour had some fascinating things in a series that unfortunately got spiked by the Australian network. But there's just
Mhm.
a lot of evidence about Tom Cruise not just being a Scientology fanatic, but engaging in Scientology's, worst practices.
Right. That's right.
Well, Claire, thank you
Yep,
so much for
and full
speaking up about
knowledge.
it. Thank you.
Yes,
You
likewise to
know,
you. Thank you for everything that you do.
I was stunned when I saw what you wrote, and I was so happy that you did. That was just really great, and you said, and look, I'm sure you got some blowback, but I think it was worth it. I think you did a great job with that.
Thank you. I will say, being that I'm not on some big platform, I was, like I said, shocked and floored by the response. But I also, I have, I said exactly what I needed to say, in my opinion. So I'm grateful to everyone who shared it and helped to get the word out because it's how I feel.
Well, Tom Cruise just better not run into you, because I'm sure that you would have some things to say to him.
No
Eh,
joke.
he
Yeah.
would not be able to shatter
I'd love to
suppression.
see him to try and confront and shatter me because it will fail.
I'm sure it would.
Yep.
Claire, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to tell people about what you're doing? What's happening? What do you want to plug?
I would like to plug the Aftermath Foundation because we talked about, people escaping, and I am just so grateful that I'm a member of that foundation. And we've helped, as you know, helped people get out, and I hope to very much continue that work, because it makes it so that it's a much softer landing for people on the outside. And there's a great network out here. You're part of that. I'm part of that. There's just people everywhere who are just incredibly kind, and that has tremendous value to someone trying to get out of that world.
And where should somebody go to support that?
The aftermathfoundation.org is our website, which hopefully we'll get to update that one of these years with some updates and stories. But we're all volunteers. It's unpaid work, but I'm tremendously grateful for the therapeutic value of being able to help people escape. It's the only
Well,
right thing to do.
I'm looking forward to buying the Mark and Claire bobbleheads. So get on that, because
Ah, and hey, by the way, one of these years, hopefully before I die, I will write a book. And here was my thought, Tony. You tell me what you think. You don't have to post this part, by the way. But so we talked about our lawsuit, and I have 4 volumes of deposition transcripts, and I thought, you know what would be amazing? I'll take excerpts from all those deposition transcripts because there's some really damning stuff in there about Scientology, by the way. And I'll like have excerpts from that at the beginning of each chapter.
or let's have a dramatic reading.
Yes! Oh, that would be amazing. Oh my
All
gosh,
right. Well,
that
let's
would be
talk about
so
that.
awesome.
If we can maybe
Yes.
do that for a future podcast. Claire, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah,
Tony.
thank you so much.
Again, to witness history, ride the storm, wait to see a reckoning, and the day they all come. Oh, but I'm hunkered down in bunker town again.